Hello and welcome, members of the Wandaverse. I'm Hannah, and you're listening to the very first episode of Into the Wandaverse, your new #1 source for all things Scarlet Witch and Friends. If you don't know me already, I'm a collector of all things Wanda Maximoff, comic, MCU, animated and otherwise. I've been posting on TikTok and Instagram for a year and a half now about Scarlet Witch news, history and merch, and I've been lucky enough that some of you care what I have to say. Longer form content doesn't tend to be the clock app style, so here I am, same as usual, but longer. This week's primary discussion will centre around Wanda's first few comic appearances before joining the Avengers, and aim to explore her early personality and relationships. But before we get into that, let's do our very first Wanda Song of the Week, which is going to be, drumroll please, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me by Taylor Swift. Did I pick this because I'm going to the Eras tour this week? Maybe so. But I also picked it because it's very much giving villain Wanda, and we are literally discussing her villain origin story this week. In news for this week, we've been told that the closed beta for Marvel Rivals, the new video game that heavily features Wanda, is set to launch in July, though we don't have an exact date yet. Unlike the closed alpha, the beta will launch on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X. Though they haven't announced the criteria for joining the beta yet, it's understood that those who reach level 10 in the closed alpha will automatically have access. Excitingly, this beta may feature more Wanda skins, so I look forward to seeing them in the coming weeks. I saw some awesome screenshots of some Scarlet Witch and Multiverse of Madness, and I'm kind of hoping that we get to see that skin flying around. Of course, we can't ignore the swirling rumours that Marvel is currently looking for a director for a Scarlet Witch solo movie. Of course, nothing official has been confirmed yet, but there's rarely this much smoke without a fire. In my personal little delusional brain, I see Marvel potentially announcing this project at D23 this year. With Vision Quest apparently going ahead, Agatha All Along coming out this September, and whispers of Billy and Tommy joining the Young Avengers, it doesn't make much sense to do all this without the Scarlet Witch herself. Whether or not Elizabeth Olsen is on board, I feel like Marvel Studios is desperate for her to come back, based on merch sales alone. Since the time of recording this, it was a relatively slow week for news. We're going to get straight into the meat of the episode. It's time to begin our journey into the Wandaverse together, by discussing the origin of the witch herself. I'm taking you all the way back to the 60s today, so tease your hair into a beehive and scream for the Beatles, because in 1964, the Scarlet Witch was born. Wanda came from the genius minds of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, originally appearing with no last name at all, known only as Wanda. She appeared in a red bathing suit, matching red boots, red opera gloves, pink tights, and a red cowl called a wimple that framed her entire face. This red, of course, is referenced in her name, which makes her appearance on the cover of X-Men 4 a little perplexing, as her outfit is green. While there have been a variety of explanations given for the Peter Pan colour on her cover look, the most likely explanation, in my opinion, seems to be that at this stage of the development, she was still being developed alongside the Enchantress, who had a similar look and always wore green. Other names considered for Wanda, according to Jack Kirby's notes, were Jinx, Witch Woman, Sorceress, and Miss Mystic. But when writing out the original lineup of the Brotherhood of Mutants, her name is settled as the Scarlet Witch, and she has never taken up another name since. I think this fact is particularly important to note, since in recent years Marvel has for some reason begun to try to separate Wanda from the Scarlet Witch, as though they were two separate entities like the Phoenix Force. But as far as comic lore has always gone, Wanda has been one with the Scarlet Witch. It's her name in the same way that Spider-Man is Peter Parker's, or Iron Man is Tony Stark's. The Scarlet Witch is no boogeyman in the closet. If you open the door, all you'll find is Wanda herself in a wimple. Wanda, though primarily associated with the Avengers, made her debut alongside her brother Pietro in 1964 in the X-Men comics as a part of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. At the time, this team consisted of Magneto himself, Mortimer Tonby, aka Toad, a mutant with leaping abilities who existed mostly to be Magneto's snivelling sidekick, Jason Wingard, aka Mastermind, who possessed the ability to cast realistic illusions, and then the twins themselves. Interestingly, rather than being introduced as straight-up bad guys, the twins are immediately reluctant members of Magneto's team, Pietro only there to protect his sister, and Wanda feeling, and constantly being reminded, as though she owes Magneto a debt. as he saved them from a literal angry mob in their home country in Eastern Europe. All because Wanda accidentally burned down a barn and they thought she was a witch. Though much of the twins' origins would shift over time, this singular event in comic books remains mostly untouched. Wanda and Pietro lived a brief and happy existence as teenagers among Romani people before being cast out and ostracized for their powers, creating a fear of humans and of being defined by their mutant abilities. Though this connection to her future Romani heritage was not distinctly defined in this first appearance, it is worth noting that the connection has always somewhat existed. Often as depicted as calm and submissive, like many of the other female comic characters of the time, Wanda would spend much of the next few years trying to calm and placate the men that she found herself surrounded by. Her very first words are an attempt to stop Pietro from getting into a fight with the other supervillains on the team. And despite being possibly the most powerful among the original Brotherhood members, other than Magneto himself, during the quarrel that breaks out, she never moves to use her powers. She does, however, strongly reject Magneto's lurid comments about making her his bride. "I'd sooner die than marry you," she declares as he calls her his spunky little witch. Issue 4's story is grand but simple. We meet the members of the Brotherhood at the dinner table as a contrast to the wholesome X-Men, who are enjoying a one-year cake. Mastermind tries to hit on Wanda, but she strongly rebuffs him, which causes a fight after Pietro steps in to defend her. Meanwhile, the very unbothered Magneto is busy stealing a freighter and returning it to his mysterious secret headquarters somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. But when he returns, Toad, like Randall from Recess, tells him that everyone was fighting, and Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch tell Magneto they don't want to be in the group anymore, and he reminds them that, tough luck, I saved your life. You've got to understand that in the early days of Magneto, he was a far cry from the Holocaust-surviving, sometimes anti-hero of the modern comic book world. Instead, his tyrannical power grab in the X-Men issue 4 has imagery that resembles a certain famous German leader. As the Brotherhood used the stolen freighter to take over the small South American country of Santa Marco, Mastermind casts an illusion to show frog marching troops, and Magneto flies a red flag with his emblem on to show his control. It's easy to see the comparison between the evil Brotherhood and the aforementioned German party. As far as comics go these days, we all sort of agree that Magneto is, to some degree, right, but just goes about things in too extreme of a way. Whereas back in the 60s, Magneto didn't care about anyone except himself. There's nothing noble about his mission. Magneto's irredeemable villainy in these early comics makes Wanda and Pietro's rejection of his ideals all the more important. As he takes over Santa Marco as a dictator, Wanda asks, "Is it necessary to plant such fear into the hearts of people, Magneto?" Establishing her compassion for others that has remained important as a character trait throughout her history. To create an escape route after the meddling X-Men and Professor pop in to interrupt our band of merry villains, Magneto wires 2 bombs, one to destroy the X-Men and another bomb that will destroy the whole nation. Both Wanda and Pietro are horrified by this, and unlike Toad and Mastermind, they decide that they simply cannot allow innocent people to die, and thus interfere. This to me has always built the argument that at her core, Wanda has always been a hero, and why her introduction into the MCU as a member of Hydra has always rubbed me the wrong way. The twins were coerced into being members of Magneto's group, and have always opposed hurting innocent people, and to rob them of this in the MCU robs them of a core part of their characterization. It's why I had hoped in our retread of Wanda's backstory in WandaVision, we might have added a detail that Wanda and Pietro had been some way forced into joining Hydra, that they had never joined the group willingly, and had been tricked into joining the organization. I think while it would have been nowhere close to their original backstory in the comics, it might have at least followed the spirit of the story. Wanda's powers in these early issues are referred to as her hex powers, a reference of course to her name, the Scarlet Witch. At this stage, her powers were linked only to her status as a mutant, rather than to any actual ability with witchcraft. Her powers were extremely loosely defined, with her hex power referring to the fact that she could cause random and unlikely things to happen to her enemies in a sort of targeted bad luck. Again, it wasn't uncommon at all for powers to be loosely defined within comics. It's only more recently that both readers and authors have become concerned with power scaling and so strictly defining what characters can and cannot do. Stan Lee has always maintained that a character's powers should really be able to bend to what is situationally necessary within the story. and we definitely see that in these early issues. Wanda's hex power was portrayed as unpredictable, and so not always helpful to Wanda in her battles, which was used as a plot device to make her less likely to use them. During the argument that ensues during the first few panels that Wanda appears in, Quicksilver reminds her not to point her finger at Mastermind, as that always causes a disaster to occur, seemingly confirming Wanda's lack of control over her powers. This is unfortunately a common theme with the female characters of comic books of this era. In the same issue, Jean Grey accidentally attacks her own teammates when she mistakes them for the Brotherhood. While less hot-headed than her male teammates, she is consistently more passive and less likely to use her powers. Both Wanda and Jean were the token women in their teams, while Janet and Sue were the female members of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, respectively. All of them, bar Janet, who shared powers with her husband, were given unique but mostly defensive rather than offensive abilities. Despite speed seemingly being a less aggressive power than bad luck, it is Quicksilver that often takes the more offensive stance. Comic historian David Zimmerman argued that Wanda's relatively passive power and tight costume were meant to appeal to male readers who wanted their comic book heroines to be present and beautiful, but not the ones creating the majority of the action. Wanda's second appearance, in issue 5, sees her and Pietro more at odds with the values of the Brotherhood than ever, since they have very little interest in pursuing the X-Men. Magneto obviously wants to destroy the group, since he argues that they oppose everything the Brotherhood stands for, while Wanda and Pietro want to explore a more live and let live attitude. While hanging out on Asteroid M, the Brotherhood's outer space headquarters, yes, you heard me correctly, their outer space headquarters, I need to know where Magneto was getting the budget for all this. Who was building it? Did they have Wanda doing manual labor? So far, the Brotherhood, in all their wisdom, have been unable to locate the X-Men's super secret headquarters, and so they need to come up with a plan. The plan turns out to be sending Toad in disguise to take part in a track event so that he will be accused of cheating by the crowd, and the X-Men will see a mutant in distress and come to his rescue. A little convoluted, but it does work up until the X-Men pull off Toad's mask early, and so the Brotherhood must attack. They kidnap Angel and take him back to their headquarters, where Magneto then interrogates Angel about the whereabouts of the X-Men's headquarters. He refuses to talk to Magneto and then attempts to brainwash him. The X-Men still have Toad in their custody and debate what to do with him. However, he suddenly feels the urge that he must return to Magneto, and so the X-Men decide to simply follow him, surprising the Brotherhood, who were very much not expecting them. Magneto attempts to simply off the X-Men with a push of the button, but Wanda stops him, declaring, "You told me you would never ever descend to murder," before hexing the control panel, with the ensuing argument between the twins and Magneto being the distraction that allows the X-Men to rescue Angel and escape, but not before blowing up Asteroid M, which must have been pretty costly for the bank of Magneto. In issue 6, Wanda is introduced to Namor, who becomes the first person other than Pietro to be kind to her. Magneto believes that using Wanda as a honey trap will convince Namor to join the Brotherhood. And you know, it probably would have worked on me. Namor is, of course, enchanted by our Scarlet Witch, because who wouldn't be? But he does refer to her exclusively as the girl, or woman, which, you know, isn't terribly romantic. However, he does defend her against both Magneto and the X-Men. He also, like many of the other men she encounters in these early comics, considers romantic interest in her, noting her apparent similarity to Sue Storm. Most of this issue covers the struggle between the X-Men and the Brotherhood for recruiting Namor to their side. This issue also features yet another base for the Brotherhood, and so a new home for Wanda. This time it's on an island powered by a magnet controlled by Magneto. The island is at the end of the issue destroyed by Namor. I literally don't know how Eric is going to financially recover from this. The other notable thing that happens in this issue is that Professor X implies that the reason that Wanda and Pietro continue to stay with Magneto is because they are being subconsciously mentally controlled by him. But don't get attached to this idea, because it's literally never mentioned again. Aside from her appearances in the X-Men, Wanda also appeared as a foe, this time for the Human Torch and the Thing in Strange Tales. The beginning of this comic once again sees Quicksilver trying to persuade Wanda to escape from Magneto because of the stunning reason that he's too evil, while she reminds him of their debt. Wanda argues that they swore their allegiance to Magneto and that honor is important for their family, while Pietro points out that being evil henchmen isn't doing all that much for their honor. Wanda counters that the outside world will never accept them and that humans will always fear them. Pietro, for the first time, mentions the Avengers and that he and Wanda may be able to find a home with other powered people, though ones that are doing good rather than evil. The subsequent fight with the Thing and the Human Torch, where the twins try to explain that they came in peace and that they just want to help, only to be rebuffed, leave Wanda and Pietro once again convinced that the only place that they will find safety and acceptance is with Magneto. The end of the comic describes an alliance that could have been. Wanda and Pietro finally leave their toxic situationship with Magneto in issue 11 of the X-Men, after Magneto once again abandons them when Quicksilver is in harm's way. This issue actually gives us a deeper insight into Wanda's character, as she passes up the opportunity to leave Magneto to live a life of luxury with Mastermind due to her strength of character and unwillingness to leave her brother. They are then invited to join the X-Men, and Wanda wants to, but she is stopped by Quicksilver, who tells her that he'll be the only one calling the shots from now on. The only woman on the team, Jean, doesn't want them to join because she's worried that Wanda is eyeing up her man. Nobody wants Scott, Jean. The twins declare that they are back off home to Central Europe, and they are going to forget the endless battle of mutant against mutant, unless there comes a day when they are needed to help in a battle for the safety of mankind. The twins aren't seen again until the Avengers, issue 16, in an isolated Swiss chalet. A graceful black-haired beauty watches as the fastest human on Earth races towards her. Pietro has brought Wanda news that the Avengers are looking for new members, and he wants them to attempt to join. Wanda is still reluctant to use her powers at the bidding of others, though she mentions that she always knew that the X-Men were the ones in the right. She asks Pietro again why he didn't let her accept the X-Men's invitation to join their cause, and he admits that he didn't want to be reminded that he's a mutant all the time. He hopes instead that the Avengers will accept them into their ranks without defining them only by their mutant status. Wanda is placated by this, and she agrees that she will write to the Avengers, and so the twins send off a very heartfelt letter hoping to become members. They are met at the docks by Tony Stark, who is in this period of Avengers history, claiming only to be the person that leases the building to the Avengers, and is to bring them to meet the other Avengers. They pose to the press and then head inside with the promise that they will be interviewed as candidates for the new Avengers. Throughout her first arc as a character, Wanda has very little agency over any of the decisions that are made in her life. She is a pawn to Magneto, an object to Mastermind and Namor, and dominated by her brother's wants and needs. Even joining the Avengers, which remains her most closest affiliation to this day, is decided upon entirely by Pietro. What we learn about her is that she is compassionate and protective. She wants to protect the innocent and have a normal life with her brother. Her feats of magic, though small, do give us a hint of the powerful being that she'll become, as in these early comics, it's more her failure or unwillingness to use them that causes her to be overpowered than her actual lack of power. In terms of Wanda's relationships in her pre-Avengers days, her only positive one is of course with Pietro, her dedicated yet overbearing brother. Her priority above all else, even her own safety, is always that of Pietro. She is terrorized by Magneto, lusted after by Toad and Mastermind, and immediately disliked by Jean, who sees her as a romantic rival. What we learn about Wanda over these first few appearances is more than anything she seeks belonging and safety. Her and Pietro value being seen as loyal and refuse to take part in the more extreme antics of the Brotherhood. These early comics are the perfect foundation for the argument that at her core Wanda has always been a hero. Her and Pietro are directly responsible for the X-Men not being offed several times, and continually prove that they are not actually willing to take part in activity that causes real harm. Honestly, if I'd been reading these comics when they were first released, I'm pretty sure that I would have been convinced that Wanda and Pietro were on their way to becoming X-Men. And honestly, I think it's to some degree legendary that they didn't. It was the beginning of a more complicated relationship that mutants could have with mutant identity. While both the X-Men and the Brotherhood have different ideas about being mutants, they are both happy to be defined by this identity, while Wanda and Pietro both express that they want to be more than just their mutant gene. Overall, I would summarize Wanda's first adventures as setting her up to be a complicated and interesting character. While she does suffer from being a female character in a male-driven story, her status as a reluctant villain allows her to be less one-dimensional. We also learn that she has a strong moral code and cannot be seduced by wealth or power. She also had 2 romantic interests already, and we've established somewhat of a backstory to her. It should be noted, though, that she does not yet have a last name. On the next episode, I'll be back with more news, more fun, and we'll be diving into Wanda's first stint as a member of the Avengers team as a member of Cap's kooky quartet, and have a look at some of her first ever merchandise. Thank you so much for beginning this journey into the Wandaverse with me. If you'd like to keep up to date with the news as it happens, you can follow me over on TikTok at Into the Wandaverse, where I post videos almost every day, or find me on Instagram at Into the Wandaverse. Please rate and review on whatever podcasting streaming service you're listening to. Podcast art by Gulaxy Art, produced by the lovely Nick, and also kind of directed by Nick too. I've been Hannah. Stay magical, and I'll see you very soon.